Over a century has passed since the birth of cinema. In that time, new technologies have firmly established themselves in the film arts, giving them sound, color, and even volume. Today, for the modern filmmaker, nothing is impossible. The Moscow studio, FXDG Group, is one of a select few in Russia that is putting the boldest of cinematic ideas into practice, from the creation of complex prosthetic makeup for actors to the development and manufacture of animatronic characters, monsters, animals, and people. The studio is headed by Pyotr Gorshenin, a makeup artist and president of the National Guild of Makeup Artists of Russia. Over the course of its existence, the FXDG Group has taken part in the creation of over 50 films, many of which received major awards at international film festivals. The studio appeared in the 1990s, when I first started doing prosthetic makeup and began to move in this direction. Over the course of the last 10 years, there have been attempts to move in different directions: painting, sculpture, interior design, work on television, interiors, theatre sets. Pyotr Gorshenin has never specifically studied the creation of cinematic special effects. It was his training in the arts and an unusual approach that revealed itself as early as his childhood, and that helped him to master the profession. I really wanted to have red Indians and knights, but I didn't have them. It was the Soviet Union. I wanted cars, just like real ones. So I made it all myself, and I was really happy. True, if it was summer and it was made out of plasticine, then it would all melt and all my toys would be remade overnight. And then they go in the freezer. And Mum always said that you'd open up the freezer and there would be red Indians living in there. Cars and knights and animals and dinosaurs. All this came in handy later in his profession, when he had to invent fantastical characters where their images weren't established by the script. Based on his own concepts, Gorshenin created the external appearance of the characters, giving them facets of character and behavior. The first picture that I was invited to work on was Alexander Pushkin's Russian Revolt in 1998. It was fated that my skills came in handy. That was the starting point for the development of a whole sphere in film. I simply realized that this sphere, here in Russia, was almost entirely absent. Alexander Pushkin, all the best to him, recommended me for another picture. That was German's It's Difficult Being God. And there it really got started. That's when I found myself with the most faithful, the most, I think, talented, my closest comrades, my assistants. There are just 6 people in Pyotr Gorshenin's team. They've been working him from the very start. The team is closely knit and tried and tested. Each of them is a specialist in their field, but at the same time, they all help one another. Every project begins with the setting of some sort of task by the director. All of those tasks are discussed, and the result is that we get a certain list of objects that we have to create. It all starts with a sculpture. Pyotr does the sculpture for the most part. My colleagues and I help him with that. As soon as all the sculptures are ready, the molding process begins. When we've got all the molds, then we actually start creating the objects, either plastic details or dummies or monsters. It all depends on the task at hand. The specialists at the FXDG Group studio can turn young people into old people. They can create fantastical creatures. They can recreate historic figures. Pyotr Gorshenin has worked with many famous Russian and foreign film directors. Today, his filmography includes over 50 films. In 2008, Morphia, directed by Alexei Balabanov, was released on Russian screens. Pyotr Gorshenin's team had been faced with an incredibly complex task in the making of the film. They had to develop a fundamental knowledge of the human anatomy in order to achieve it. In one scene in the film, a peasant is brought to the young doctor. She'd got caught in a grain threshing machine. The girl required an emergency operation. Her leg had to be amputated. For the shoot, Gorshenin's studio recreated a leg, detailing the anatomy of its construction. The film Morphia stunned viewers with the realism of the surgical operation in the scene. Before, you thought you just took a saw and sawed off the leg. There are lots of nuances. You use a certain scalpel for the leg. The saw is only to go through the bones. To saw off this bone, after you've sawed it off, you have to round it off so that it doesn't pierce the flesh. The consultant, who was a practicing surgeon, he was delighted. It is said that he didn't see any real difference. We did the dummy, the whole effect of sawing. We used a gel rather than silicone. The gel even wobbled like fat. And we did everything so that the viewer wouldn't realize that it was all artificial. In a film, those details that create the real detailing, blood, amputated legs, they don't make such a strong impression when you're working. And that's probably a good thing, because I was playing a nurse. And those feelings for me, as a character, shouldn't have been there. Nurses encounter all that every day. One of the most complex scenes in the film is a birth that, on screen, had to look as realistic as possible. For the scene, a robotic dummy of a newborn baby, an animatic construction, was created. Alexei Balabanov is a director who uses realism. He wanted a very frank realism. So Pyotr also prepared a stomach. And he created babies, and they made this whole construction, a false bottom, through which we took the baby. According to the script, it had to be a girl, and she was suffocating, but still alive. So she had to be unconscious. That was the very complex job at hand we had, and the stomach of the mother had to be deflated after the newborn had been removed. The baby in the shot is handed over to the nurse, and the nurse had to put the baby into cold water, to slap it on the back, and only at that moment, when it was slapped on the back and on the bum, was the baby to come to life. The difficulty was that it had to be entirely hermetic, as it was going to be submersed in water. I think that we managed to achieve all those tasks. Our baby acted brilliantly in the shot. We spent about 4 months on creating him, in order to make all the internal mechanisms and all the electronic components for what we might call a robot. In order for the baby to move its hands and legs at the right moment, to cry, to breathe, and to twitch its nose, server cables were placed inside the robot, miniature motors, each of which had been programmed with a trajectory of movement. They were controlled with the aid of radio signals. The main thing about Pyotr is that he's driven by passion. He's passionate about what he does. That's why people have a lot of respect for him. You can tell that he adores what he does. Alexei Balabanov was sitting in the next room, watching on a monitor, and he only came out to make one adjustment to the text. I think the whole scene was shot in 1 or 2 takes. For another episode in the film Morphia, where the doctor is operating on a girl who is sick with diphtheria, several very precise dummies of the 8-year-old girl were made. Her throat had to be cut in the shot. Her trachea had to be removed, had to be cleaned of diphtherial plaque, and then the trachea had to be sewn up. How can you do that on film? We prepared a dummy where inside the neck there was a precise copy of the entire anatomy of a human neck, of an 8-year-old girl. We met up with a professor who specializes in tracheotomies. With the professor, I established the viscosity of the liquid that was supposed to splash from the dissected trachea right onto the glasses of our main character. It all had to be calculated. We had to prepare the dummy. We had to create a test dummy so that the actor, cutting through the dummy of the throat, understood how hard he had to press into the silicone skin so that he wouldn't ruin the shot. So we created several fragments of the neck with splatters that were exactly the same. The viewer wasn't supposed to realize that this was an effect, that it was a special effect or that it had been switched. Many people say, there's so little of it in the shot, it's just 2 seconds long, but so much work. It's all done for that. The film isn't about our special effects. We're just tools used to achieve the emotions that the film is supposed to inspire. The FX Design Group studio is one of a select few in Russia where specialists in the sphere of plastic makeup create realistic special effects for film. They create animatronic characters ranging from the fantastical to very realistic creatures. They create models of people and animals. The studio is headed by Pyotr Gorshenin, a makeup artist and president of the National Guild of Makeup Artists of Russia. The studio's filmography comprises over 50 films by Russian and foreign directors. Pyotr Gorshenin was recommended to me by Nikita Mikhalkov. I had a very important job. For Tiger, I needed prosthetic makeup, as it's called. Firstly, I needed it for a tank driver with burns, and secondly, I needed it for when he'd almost entirely recovered, but certain marks remained. There was a lot of work in general on burnt tank crews and injured soldiers. We did a lot of tests. In fact, he created a lot of options during the prep period. Overall, he made a great impression on me, all of his work. That's how we started working together. In 2011, work began on Karen Shakhnazarov's film The White Tiger, and the work of Pyotr Gorshenin's studio was to play a key role. We had a difficult task in that film. The tank driver got burnt, and everyone wanted to bury him. We had to visualize the extent of his burns, so that the viewer would clearly understand that this guy was a goner. In the film's plot, the tank driver, Ivan Naidionov, with lethal burns, reaches hospital where the doctors believe he'll die. As well as prosthetic makeup, a dummy of the burnt character was created for the scene. There was a moment where we put our dummy and the actor in makeup in our studio. And then the director, Karen Shakhnazarev, was invited to come in. I came in, and at that very moment I saw 2 characters. One was alive, and next to him was his dummy. Pyotr Gorshenin sat them down next to one another, and the actor, Alexei Verkov, was playing along. He didn't breathe, he didn't move, and he says, "Which one?" I couldn't tell which one was the living actor. The dummy was such an accurate copy. He's really responsible about everything. When something connected with his work was being shot, he would always come to the set, however far away it was. We weren't shooting in Moscow, of course. He would fly in, he was always there. In each shot, he was tracking every single detail. He's a real fanatic about his work. The next stage in the work, which was just as complex, was to show the viewers how this lead character was returned to life. For this, several versions of the prosthetic makeup were created, matching various stages in the recovery of the burns. All of the elements in the makeup were created with an incredible accuracy that allowed the actor to be shot in close-up. Surname, name. There was a lot of painstaking work on his recovery with the aid of prosthetic makeup. And we see in the images the way he was. It took 4 to 5 hours to do the makeup for the burnt character, Naedionov. It was incredibly hard work, both for the makeup artist and for Pyotr, and for the actor, because just being in that makeup. And if we're talking about Pyotr's responsibility, I mean, essentially, you couldn't simplify it. You could simplify it, in fact. You could just do the surface. But he did everything comprehensively, entirely, including the shapes, the molds. What's a burns victim? It's the shape of the burns, the helmet, the uniform, the boots, and he did all that as a unit. I've even said to him, look, maybe I'll just shoot it like this, from this angle. But he said, no, maybe on the set you'll need this. Well, you want to do it like this. I can't work that way. We have to do it all. And it's really difficult work. In 2010, Pyotr Gorshenin was asked by the renowned director Alexander Sakurov to create a character for the film Faust. In the film's plot, Faust's student, Wagner, in an attempt to produce a man, creates a fantastical creature, homunculus. The task given to us by the director was to get this character from a test tube of liquid. Entirely inside the liquid, he had to look at an actress, smile to her, breathe, and release bubbles from his mouth. Then the test tube has to be dropped. It smashes, and the homunculus has to be killed by the glass piercing his body. After several trials, they had the idea of creating the homunculus in the form of a tea mushroom with human characteristics. The idea was a success and was approved. They just had to work out how to get the animatronics inside the test tube. We put our homunculus together inside the test tube. Inside a test tube. Basically, we managed to get the job done. We had to work out how to operate this creature of such a small size within the test tube, within the liquid. Naturally, you can't immerse the mechanisms or electronics in water. They wouldn't work properly. We came up with an entire system so that the operating systems would actually be outside the test tube. We ordered special test tubes. It was a really long, involved process with that picture. It took 4 months to create the homunculus. The effort paid off. The character made a very powerful impression on viewers. One of the most complex and painstaking pieces of work carried out by the artists of the FX Design Group studio involves hair. The manufacture of wigs, beards and moustaches requires a huge amount of concentration of attention and accuracy. The number of hairs in each wig can reach 100,000, and each of them has to be sewn into the artificial leather by hand. The creation of one piece can take from several days to several weeks. At Pyotr Gorshenin's firm, the work is done by Tatyana Melkomov, Maxim Bulanov, Nikita Avramov and Tanya Melkomova are an astonishing team. They really are capable of carrying out any task they're set. Consultants have been here, including Americans. They've come to the set and they've seen what Pyotr has done and they've said, you know, we've got nothing left to do here, and they've left. Of course, that's wonderful. Another complex job for the artists at the FX Design Group was prosthetic makeup for Valery Nikolaev, who was playing a 74-year-old spy, Dmitry Bystroletov. We already knew each other, and it was a dream to work together. And at last, an opportunity cropped up. The project was called The Recruiter. It was the story of Dmitry Bystroletov, a man who worked at the beginning of the 20th century in espionage. He had an incredible, complex story. He worked in espionage for 13 years. He spent 18 years in camps. He knew 22 foreign languages, the last on the list being Japanese and Chinese. Unfortunately, Dmitry died at the age of 72, so we decided, let's try and create, rather than a portrait makeup, a person who would tell the tale, the character at the age of 74. To create the image for Dmitry Bystroletov, Pyotr Gorshenin studied his biography in detail and even met with people who actually knew the spy. The prep process is 6 hours. The development of the makeup was another 2 weeks before that. It had to be approved by the producers. It was a search with Pyotr taking part directly, and it really was the creation of a character. Because every characteristic, every detail in the makeup, those very subtle silicone details, which are less than a millimeter in width, plus the hair, plus the entire process in itself, all of it together, of course it has a big influence in how the viewer perceives it all. So the work took a lot of time, but the result was stunning. Because we just wanted to test how reviewers would react to this makeup. And on the way from the studio, where we did the makeup, to the set, I decided to drop in on a couple of places where they knew me. And to my astonishment, and joy of course, no one spotted me or worked out who I was at all. At a distance of just half a meter, they took me for a 74-year-old elderly man. It was a joy, and of course, it was a triumph. In order to create the prosthetic makeup for an actual person, you need the precision of a jeweler. Whether the film would be convincing or not is entirely down to the makeup's ability to recreate the original. You know, he's an artist. That means he has a very attentive eye, deep psychological analysis. Or when you're talking with Pyotr about the goal, what the director needs to be done, it still all comes from the inside. The biography of the actor is developed, his entire internal world, which is reflected in his external image, in his clothing and so on. And what's great here is that he has a really painstaking approach. He's really thoughtful about the tiniest of details, in the biographies, and what happens to a person, and whether there were events in their lives that were reflected in their external appearance, scars, burns, or something like that. Wrinkles, literally wrinkles. If a person smiles a lot, we see the wrinkles in the corners of their eyes. If he is serious, or heaven forbid, he's a depressive person, then there are traces on the face that are entirely different. So Pyotr finds this work really interesting. And it was interesting to work with him. Creating the sketches as a rule involves 10 different options that are laid out in front of the director, and then together we decide which is the most applicable. We've done some really incredible things. We did Bystroletov, almost everything. The wig, the makeup, everything seems okay. Everything seems wonderful. But we spent a long time looking at the moustache. And there was something missing, some sort of detail. And then the solution came. The ends of the moustache shouldn't go down. They had to be slightly twisted up, with a slightly cheeky touch to them. As soon as we did that, it all fell into place. That's it, there it is. The FX Design Group is one of the most in-demand Russian studios specializing in prosthetic makeup. It creates special effects for Russian and foreign films. The team of artists is led by the president of the Russian Guild of Makeup Artists, Pyotr Gorshenin. Over the course of the studio's existence, it has worked on over 50 feature films. One of its major works was for Karen Shahnazarov's The White Tiger, where the studio's artists created several dummies and complex prosthetic makeup for burnt and injured tank crews. In 2010, the producers of the film Vysotsky, Thanks for Being Alive, set Pyotr Gorshenin's team an incredibly difficult task: to turn the actor Sergei Bezrukov into the extremely popular actor, poet and musician Vladimir Vysotsky. This would be the first time anything of the kind had been tried in Russian cinema. There were several tests, and then the decision was taken, not by us, but by the production and directing team, that an actor who I greatly respect will perform the role, Sergei Bezrukov, who in terms of his height, his build, his inner content, didn't just match the bill. He could play the role brilliantly, and that's one of the major elements to get a result. But another component, a similarity, was just totally missing, and we were responsible for that second component. Death circles, and then bang, it's gone. Who? Nobody. To put it in anthropological terms, my skull is completely different. The size of the eyes, the distance between the eyes, that's all completely different. Pyotr could see in my face, just working a little with the prosthetics, he could make out the characteristics, convey the characteristics of Vladimir Vysotsky. The name of the actor performing the role of Vysotsky was kept secret. Nobody was supposed to know who was playing him, even his colleagues on the set. That was the main intrigue in the creation of the film. The shooting period was preceded by a long preparatory process. For half a year, the artistic team studied photographs, did sculptures, molds, and masks. Over 500 photographs from the actor's personal archive, as provided by Vysotsky's son, Nikita, were studied. Vysotsky was seen from different angles in these shots, in different lighting, magnified to various extents. In some, you could make out the texture of the skin, birthmarks, everything needed for the creation of a sculpture. Before getting down to work on the makeup, the artist had to take into account all the nuances in the great man's facial expressions and mimicry. First, we took a mold of the actor's face. It's called the original mold. Then we get its model, the model of the face, which is separated into several sections. In this case, it's the forehead, the neck, chin, the nose. And then the sculpture is created. What's a sculpture? A sculpture is when, using the model of the actor, we create a sculpture of the character. In this case, it's Vysotsky we wish to create. And it's at the sculpture stage that we have to understand how subtle the sculpture has to be, where we have to have which muscles, where the future fake skin has to be stretched. Every millimeter, every pore, you have to go through every part of the sculpture being created. It has to pass through your hands, through your soul, through your heart, in order for it to work out. All of the components in the makeup are made of silicone, which is transparent to begin with. In order to create an imitation of the tone of human skin, the colorist needs an incredibly high level of skill. On purpose, I began with a song where there can be absolutely no doubt about who's in front of you. Pyotr Buslov's film Vysotsky, Thank You for Being Alive, came out in December of 2011 and immediately became the Russian film premiere of the year. They set up the lights and I went out into the shot. They're not letting me go there yet. Pyotr Buslov just came up and asked, Vladimir, can I have a cigarette? And I was in the makeup. I'd already started to really work in the mask. This kind of improvisation, a sketch. And in that moment, I heard this unanimous wow. When it really fell into place and people couldn't distinguish between the man in the mask and the actual person. After the prosthetic elements had been put on Bezrukov's face, hair specialists got down to work. They implanted hairs into the artificial skin, creating eyebrows and stubble. In order to make it as real as possible, the image of the character had to take every single detail into consideration. It's actually extremely complex work. It requires a huge amount of concentration, a really good eye. Usually I work with big magnifying glasses in order to achieve perfection, because sometimes I work with hairs which can't even be seen without a magnifying glass. I brought my reference from work. They said there were some problems with the form. For me, the appearance of a new actor on the set was always interesting, because the new actor hadn't yet got used to it and was seeing me in makeup for the first time. You know, that's worth a lot. That feeling when people start to get the jitters. I really saw that. Men and women, of course. The men that got it, they started to nervously twitch, and they started to stutter. Throughout the course of the shooting period, Sergei Bezrukov came to the set long before the other actors and left after them. All of the operations and the application of the prosthetic makeup were worked out down to the last minute. Thanks to a special glue, the components immediately stuck onto the skin. The slightest mistake by the makeup artist could mean that the whole process would have to be begun anew from scratch. It really was difficult work. I was convinced that after about 10 shooting days, he'd be avoiding us, because psychologically, it's very difficult to withstand what we were doing to him, of course. But he was very patient. He endured a great deal. An actor has to bring anything that he comes into contact with to life. For that, you need special powers of observation. You need an imagination. Pyotr helped me to make that transformation, because that mask was a living thing. Of course, it couldn't let you transform totally, because living skin gives a sense, say, of veins filling up, going red from the tension in the face. A mask can't do that, of course. And that makes it all the more difficult to work, because the mask doesn't give that full sense of being alive. You have to work with your eyes, your heart, your soul, and as the eyes are the mirror of the soul, you have to convey that through the viewer, through the screen. That's what I had to do. And at the same time I was working with the director, Pyotr, and the cameraman were standing by. They knew the best angles. When I was playing the role, living inside it, I still had to think about the angles. I had to look and see where the camera was. And with my peripheral vision, I had to be aware that Pyotr Gorshenin was here, say, showing me. I realized that playing the role, I had to work with my partner. When I did that, I also had to realize that this angle worked like this, that this was a certain look, that I had to transform, and that I also had to think about how I looked. That was an incredible amount of work, believe me. I'm sorry, I don't sing encores. Thank you. It's been a warm reception. I'd even say hot. It's your climate here. The heat. The producers got us together around a big screen, and we're watching the result, how this prosthetic makeup behaves next to an actor who isn't in prosthetic makeup, how the prosthetic makeup is lit by warm light, by cold light, how its translucency works, how it works with facial expressions. And it was only after that we understood where we had more work to do, and where we'd already got the right effect. What does perfecting it involve? It means molding the entire sculpture again, taking a mold again. We do that, and then we get the whole crew together again, and we look at the improvement. We had 9 tests like that. So we spent about half a year on that to get the result where Vladimir Vysotsky and the actor Sergei Bezrukov are combined in one, at some stage, in one organic person. The virtuoso work performed by the makeup artists in the transformation of Sergei Bezrukov into Vladimir Vysotsky almost appeared to be on a par with the work of cosmetic surgeons, with the only difference being that following each shooting day, the makeup was removed and the actor had his own face returned to him. I remember that once we had this very unusual situation. It was a shooting day, where first he was being shot in one role and then he was shot without makeup. I brought him a glass of water to drink. I came onto the set and I couldn't find him. And then I suddenly realized that I'd forgotten what he actually looked like. And he touched me on the shoulder from behind and says, "Tanya, I'm here." I simply didn't expect him to look like that without makeup. I wasn't used to it anymore because we would get there really early, sometimes at 3 in the morning or 4. We immediately started to do the makeup and we forgot how he looked. We got used to the appearance he had on set. That must be really uncomfortable, stamping your feet in the dark, whistling. You've shown yourself, but no one's seen you. Please turn on the light in the auditorium. I remember a presentation. When the project was presented in Petersburg at the Mikhailovsky Theatre, there were producers and distributors sitting in the hall. I think we showed 10 minutes of material. For the viewers, it was already an interesting sensation. There was this rumbling in the hall. And then the light came on the stage. And there's an old microphone. The door to the hall opens. There's a pathway. And I walk out onto the stage with my guitar. I'll never forget that. The room froze. And there was this whispering. Vladimir, Vladimir. There was a sense of the mystic. Later, the producers told me that people were crying. I've come out with a guitar on purpose, so there will be no doubt about who's come to see you. The FX Design Group is a studio where the boldest of cinematic ideas are put into practice. It comprises professional artists who work in the creation of prosthetic makeup and special effects for film. The studio is headed by a makeup artist and president of the National Guild of Makeup Artists, Pyotr Gorshenin. Since 1990, the studio's team has worked on over 50 films, including Karen Shakhnazarov's White Tiger and Pyotr Buslov's Vysotsky. Thank you for being alive. Another film that Pyotr Gorshenin was invited to create characters for was V, directed by Oleg Stepchenko. The picture of V involved a lot of work, with animatronics, with characters, with dummies, with monsters, and also with normal actors through the use of normal makeup. Shall we stick the end of the horn on? That's how far we've got. Pyotr says to me, let's stick the end on. Our range of tasks include the development of the creative element in almost all of the characters. The film V was an adaptation of the novella of the same name by Nikolai Gogol. It's narrated by a visiting Englishman, Jonathan Green, played by the actor Jason Fleming. The variety of evil spirits created by Pyotr Gorshenin's studio make an incredibly powerful impression. For the shooting of V, he prepared several werewolf Cossacks that turned into terrifying monsters. The role of the Cossack, Dorosh, was played by an actor who has appeared in both Russian and American films, Igor Zhizhikin. I used to work in the Cirque du Soleil, and we would use prosthetic masks in that circus, so I already knew what it involved when it's just your two nostrils breathing and you're entirely covered. But here we went even further. I was entirely covered. My entire body was covered. So we weren't just doing the head, we were covering the entire body, and then a costume was cut out and put on my back. My arms, and then I was shot. The entire body had all the hair removed. It was really difficult. I remember when we'd only started, the makeup took almost 8 hours in order to get it right, because firstly, Pyotr Gorshenin, he's such a perfectionist, every single detail. Nothing is bodged. Everything has to be just right. It took a long time, of course, to get used to it. We've worked together for many years, 5 or 6 years. In that time, of course, we've already got used to working with another. It's got faster, but all the same, it's really difficult. Over the course of the plot's development, the appearance of certain characters changed. This meant that several versions of their prosthetic makeup were created for some actors. Can you imagine what it's like to wear silicone makeup for the whole day? I'm not talking about on the face, I'm talking about prosthetic makeup for the whole body, where you put a suit on. That's what I call silicone makeup, because it's on you, your body can't breathe. I fly, I come jumping out of God knows where, I'm hurtling around. It's physically hard to work like this. Not only did I lose about 5 kilos in weight every shooting day, and that was just water. Pyotr was helping me. He made holes in the suit. Only he knew where those points were and stuff like that. And he would let the water out of the places where it would build up. When I was in the Czech Republic and I walked down the corridors of their big studio, I would bump into someone and they weren't expecting it. They nearly had heart attacks. Of course, I'd look in the mirror and see a complete transformation. I knew how to play. I knew what I had to do because makeup like that, it does the acting for you. Now Pyotr Gorshenin has decided to chop my head off. With the aid of prosthetic makeup, the film's lead character was created, played by Olga Zaitseva. For certain scenes in the film, separate arms were produced, as well as a precise copy of the actress's body. There are rumors that it's not very nice to get into a coffin, and something happens in there. We basically got rid of the need for the actress to take part in the unpleasant process of lying in a coffin. That wasn't just because of certain mystical concerns. There are also a lot of stunts done with that coffin, and it was fairly dangerous. The coffin was supposed to fall apart. For dozens of takes, the coffin was supposed to be hanging on by some roots. So that was done especially. The roots were woven around the dummy. Then there were several stages in the transformation of the dummy of the young woman. She was supposed to age. She was supposed to get younger and to be covered over with a cobweb with roots. She was supposed to grow over with flowers. There were a lot of tasks that had to be carried out. And we were fairly successful in achieving all that. For example, we needed real lilies that were going to decorate the girl's coffin. And in one shot they had to dry out. And then in the next they had to bloom, for example. And naturally, for the computer-generated imagery, the girl couldn't sigh, and her eyes couldn't move, and her veins couldn't beat. That wouldn't have worked. So we made a dummy. The characters' wings were made and shot separately. The mechanism in their construction was supposed to imitate the movement of the wings of a bat. In order to make it as convincing as possible, their operation was repeatedly tested. These are the most fantastical, most horrifying wings in the world that I've ever seen. They were so revolting on the monsters that we were making them and were ourselves revolted by them, because we really did achieve what we wanted to. They were really horrifying. You looked at the wings separately and you just imagined what was meant to use those wings to fly. The film's success was directly dependent on the characters and the quality of their embodiment. That meant that there was a huge amount of responsibility involved in every stage of their creation. Everything that Pyotr Gorshenin's studio did for this picture, it wasn't just special effects for the sake of special effects. In fact, Pyotr and his team are different in that they invented and developed these monsters, how they appeared, where they came from, how living mushrooms could run about or how dumplings could give birth to mints, and how they'd fly and attack characters, how some sort of essence or creature would come out of people. There was a meaning in all this. For example, we'd already get used to a character. We know that he's greedy when it comes to money. And when this monster comes out of him, when this transformation takes place, you immediately see and understand that. Or if the character is hungry for power, then you see a different monster. None of that has been left to chance. Among the monsters created for the film, There were several animatronics dubbed farshiki, or mincers, on the set. There are certain scenes where, out of dumplings lying in a plate, out of the stuffing of these dumplings, these little flying monsters appear. They turn into these things that fly around the hut where the characters are sitting. This is a fairly simple model, let's put it that way. It's not large. Its mouth opens and closes, its eyes open and close, and it knits its brow slightly. Basically, that's about the limit of its movements. So look, you can see his mouth working. And doing that, we can change his facial expression. If we add some movement of the object itself into the shot, you get the complete sense that the object is real. It's not been drawn on a computer, and it's much better to shoot an object like this and then complete it with computer graphics afterwards. A union of two talented artists, Pyotr Gorshenin and the film's director, Oleg Stepchenko, made the creation of original ideas and unique characters possible. It's two artists, two musicians, it's two authors, two independent people. And it's a confrontation of those two independent authors whose imaginations are literally bubbling over to such an extent that they can't be put into practice, and each of them is trying to compete in doing that. So if you ask which of them created which monsters or anything like that, you won't get an answer from them. Oleg will say, Pyotr should have listened to me, and he should have done what we wanted. That would have been amazing. But then if you ask Pyotr, he'll say, it's a shame Oleg didn't listen to me, and we didn't do those monsters that I told him about. That would have been even better. And a question arises, whose are they then? That meeting will definitely end without a goodbye. There's definitely a creative conflict there. But in 2 or 3 days, sketches will appear, and again they'll come back to a discussion. The next stage will come, and then the next stage, and that's been going on for many years. In terms of the special effects and the complexity of the prosthetic makeup, V is right up there with the Hollywood blockbusters. The picture's budget was $75 million. Work on this ambitious project was carried out over 10 years in Moscow and the Czech Republic. There are lots of different schools in the West. As for me, I've been traveling on my own path, trying to breathe our air, living on our land, working with our people, and with our psychophysical character. And of course, without any categorical attitude to our Western colleagues. No, with a great deal of respect, because they've got an industry over there. And that industry has helped our field to really blossom. We didn't have an industry here. So when you look at their work, you always set yourself the goal of not being like them. Instead, you have to look for some original way forward. Pyotr is our guiding star. Without him, of course, we wouldn't exist as artists or as assistants to him. I hope that we'll carry on astonishing viewers and film crews. We like doing this. We go to the set. People are waiting for us. They understand that if we've come, if Pyotr Gorshenin has come to the set, then you can expect miracles.